Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everything Electric podcast, coming to you from sweltering UK, but in discussion with chilly and midwinter Australia. Not quite midwinter, sort of spring. This is just a joy for me. Today's guest has been on the show before. I recorded an interview with him a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, in Brisbane, Australia. Professor Ray Wills is just an extraordinary man. He is a managing director of Future Smart Energies and an adjunct professor at the University of Western Australia, and he is just an absolute fountain or mine or deep quarry of information and experience and knowledge about the energy transition. This is one of the things we discussed early on, is the speed of this energy transition. And I'm talking globally, not any individual country, but clearly different countries are changing at different rates and with different results. And it is a I kind of realized as we were talking that it's a blessing for essentially two relatively old gentlemen to be in a position to witness this change, because it is historic and it will be seen as historic, and it is really increasingly, it was always been important, but it's increasingly critically important now. We're about to have our fifth heat wave of this year tomorrow. It was pretty warm already today in the UK. I don't need to tell anyone who lives here how unusually ungreen this country is at the present time. It is extraordinary. So we're definitely going through a transition. We need to speed it up. We need to do it faster. We need to ignore all the naysayers. They're wrong. They've been proven wrong to such a deep degree that they've gone quiet. I think it's embarrassing to be supporting fossil fuel and thinking that it's fine to carry on as normal. You can only do that if you're deliberately pig ignorant or a moron. I know that's an extreme thing to say, and it's a cruel thing to say, but it's also true. And I think Professor Ray Wills will back me up on that. Not that he's here to say, calm down a bit, Robert. But this is a fascinating discussion. I really hope you take time to listen to it. It is extraordinary. He's an amazing man with amazing experience and knowledge. Please do, if you're in Australia, because we do talk about Australia in quite a lot of detail, not exclusively, but quite a lot. If you are in Australia or you're in the Sydney area in September, please do go check out the Everything Electric event in the Olympic Park in Sydney. It's going to be extraordinary. It is really going to be legendary. We also, if you're in London or you're in the southeast of England, very, very, very dry southeast of England, please do come along to Twickenham in September as well. All the links to all these events are in the show notes. It would be great to see you there. And also there's going to be they're both going to be really, really big shows. That we know for certain, with thousands of test drives available of every type of electric car you can poke a stick at. But that's all though. So please do welcome onto the Everything Electric podcast, Professor Ray Wills from Perth in Australia. Our 3 free YouTube channels on EVs and clean energy tech are funded by our fun-packed test drive-tastic events in the UK and Australia. Next up, Everything Electric Greater London, and then Sydney. All events include a B2B EV day and commercial vehicles too. Yes. Let's start with that. No, Ray, it's really good to see you again. And how are you? Let's start with that. Are you good?
Look, things are going really well at the moment. As you were aware, I was quite ill for some time. And I'm pleased to say that I'm recovered from that, and I'm pleased to say that's reflected in my output.
Excellent.
I'm writing a lot, and there's lots to say. And 2026 is particularly important because 2026 is the year we've all been waiting for. Back in 2015 and 2018, when I was doing my modelling, I said that 2025 would probably be the year. But what a hopeless futurist I was. I didn't expect COVID, and I didn't anticipate Russia would go into Ukraine. And, how obvious was that? So I'm quite happy with where we're at. I think we're actually going ahead at light speed in terms of clean tech adoption and in terms of the carbon neutral approach. And it's only going to get better because of China.
Yes, it is very. I mean, well, I definitely want to get onto China, but one of the sort of headlines that you've talked about, and I just love to explore that briefly because I sort of feel this, but I don't really have the data to back it up. It just feels like, but the idea that this is the fastest energy transition in human history we're in the middle of at the moment. And I just want to quickly think back to people. There would have been a massive energy transition when we didn't have fire. Or we didn't use fire as human beings, and then we used fire. That would have been a really big transition.
Bob hit rocks together, yay!
Yeah, we're burning sticks and I cook meat. That would have been a massive change in human experience. And then you can say the Industrial Revolution, when we learned to kind of contain fire and kind of compress it so we could make steam and run things. And then, really everything else that we use has come out of that, but it's always involved fire. And what we're seeing now is
it's always involved combustion.
It's always got combustion, which needs fuel. And at the moment, we that's the big change, isn't it?
Actually, although the surprising interlude to that is that actually hydro is a very early creation. Yes. And of course, the Dutch will say, "Oh, we did wind power first as well," but that's been important. And I think that the gain in new energy forms has always come along fast. One of the energy forms that came along particularly fast was nuclear. And people kind of think, oh, well, the French just decided to do nuclear, so they did it. No, they've been building nuclear submarines. They've been blowing up islands in the Pacific. They knew about nuclear for a long, long time. They had a general in charge. They had a couple of quite a few nuclear subs, so they knew what nuclear reactors were. Then, my history is fading from my mind, but whoever the president was of France at the time, it was the general dude. Can't think of his name.
De Gaulle,
yes. De Gaulle says to one of his nuclear generals, build me some nuclear power plants. And there was some big missive from the president, and off they went and they built them. They didn't build them because they were economic. They didn't build them because of any other reason than they weren't oil. And in the 70s when they started to build them, and in the 80s when they rolled them out, they were building them pretty damn quickly. And that's reflected in the adoption curve for energy. But and when wind came along about as fast as nuclear did originally, which is actually saying something, because we haven't really built wind farms, but we built nuclear reactors. So the rate at which wind was adopted was actually quite extraordinary in comparison to nuclear. The difference is nuclear tapered off and wind is still growing today. And then 15 years ago, not quite 15 years ago, solar came along in a big way and it launched into space and is still growing faster. The climb of that curve that plots solar growth, solar capacity growth, is just extraordinary. And the thing I'm sure will come into and around, and I'll finish my sentence in a second, is the fact that batteries are coming out faster. Now, yes, the skeptics go, but batteries don't generate energy. Of course they don't generate energy. They're a battery. They're built to store things. But what they're doing is that dispatching energy at a pace that's never been seen before, not even with solar.
Right. Yeah. That is extraordinary, isn't it? And I think this is a kind of a side note, but it's very related to it. This is, unconnected with the stuff we've been discussing, but the fact that in May of this year, solar generated more electricity in the United States of America than coal for the first time in history. And this is under an administration that is obsessed with coal and hates solar and wind, but it still happened. It doesn't matter. In a sense, it goes beyond politics and bigotry.
It does. Look, I mean, it's going to have an impact soon. Trump is actually slowing things down, but right now, solar was going so fast in the US, he couldn't stop the steam train. He slowed it up a peg, and now the same is going to be true of batteries. And he's going to have less to oppose on batteries, particularly as AI data centers start to make use of them as thinking, oh, this is a really good way to ensure reliability of our energy supply. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Yes. But then, I mean, I think we're going to, there's no way we could. Oh, well, actually, there's the other point. I thought it was a really good point you made in one of your articles was a kind of reminder of the uptake of the internet, of the World Wide Web, of how that, because we both lived through it, but because so much stuff has happened, it's hard to remember, when I first had a friend who said, I'm going to dial into the web, and it was really exciting.
Yes.
Ages, and it was
really
really slow.
That modem sound.
But I mean, in human historical terms, that was very recent. It's not that long ago, sort of late 80s, I would imagine, was when I first saw something that vaguely resembled the internet. But that for a slow initial growth, and how quickly it then went, got to 1 billion after 15 years. I mean, those sort of statistics are extraordinary. And it feels like that is a good analogy for what's happening now with energy.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges that humans have is a really poor perception of what logistic growth looks like, even though we've lived through it. You live through it with the internet, live through it with mobile phones. There's so many different smart devices that are just changing our world. But one of the smart devices isn't this one up here. We don't quite fathom the depth of it. The extraordinary production of China in all of this, and I know we're coming back to talk about that as well, but China is absolutely pivotal to this change, and there's a whole pile of reasons why. And one of the things that's difficult to understand, though, is that I've coined a phrase called Western economist disease. Right. And the example is with the International Energy Agency, although they're not the only ones, and I'm not picking on them. I'm just pointing out what they say, is that they're reporting oil consumption in China is, they don't say this word, they don't say decline, they say is weakening. Economists use the word weakening to suggest that your economy is in trouble and you're weakening. And actually, oil is declining in China because they're switching it off. And it's a really different thing. And that change is always reflected in not just the way that the economists talk about it, but when the journalists write about it, they reflect that economic language. And they say, oh, look, China's economy is weakening because they're not using oil anymore. No, that's why it's getting stronger.
Yeah, but that's quite interesting because it was a fairly reliable indicator of economic activity, wasn't it? It was oil consumption. If you're consuming a lot, then your economy is booming. And if you're consuming less,
same for coal,
Sure. That is actually, I hadn't thought of that, but that's a really good point because there's a completely new impact on oil consumption, which clearly economists haven't quite cottoned onto.
Yeah, look, and even to the point where they make excuses for it. And this Western economist disease can be extended right across to metrics like, they couldn't possibly build human android robots as cleverly as we could. That's dumb.
I've seen them up close.
And the same is true in terms of the AI constructions. There's been a view from Western society that we're the creative ones and China just copy paste. Well, maybe 20 or 30 years ago that was true, and it's in a place very true. But I was saying this only yesterday to a colleague. We've probably got 10,000 engineers doing something all through Australia, and you add them up. I don't quite know what the engineering population is, but if you go to China, that you have to add 2 zeros to the end. BYD, I'm told, according to news reports, have 150,000 engineers in their R&D department. You'll talk about costs and how that might not cost them as much as if we had 150,000 engineers. But number one, we don't have 150,000 engineers, number two, they're actually all trained academically, all trained to an engineering standard, and all doing engineering work. So they're not dolts, they're not backwards, they're absolutely forwards. And in fact, the only conclusion to draw is, and they're in front of us. Yeah. No, I mean, I had my first visit to China last year, and it is
it has stayed with me more than any other first visit to anywhere in the world. My first visit to Australia was very emotionally amazing and incredible. I was in love with an Australian. I went to Australia. It was incredible. So that had an impact. First time I went to the United States, it was a very conflicted first impact, but it was impactful. First time I went to China, I basically was walking around like just mouth open, just could not believe what I was seeing. And I only saw a tiny bit, Shanghai and Hangzhou, a couple of cities and a couple of bits around it, but very, very little in comparison. But it was the scale of the change there is we can't take it in this country or in Australia. It's a huge shift that you witness when you're there.
I've had 2 points of encounter with China. Back in 2012, I joined a business delegation which was called China 2.0. It was going to be interestingly led by a former Prime Minister who became Foreign Minister, Kevin Rudd, was going to lead that. Right. But unfortunately, he didn't because he had to have his heart operation at that time. But we got to see 6 large cities in China. They were regarded as second-tier cities because they were only, 10 and 20 million people, not 25 and 30 million people. So they didn't quite make the top ranks. But we went to Guangzhou and Changsha and Chengdu and Wuhan, and Chongqing was the biggest of all of those. Right. And we finished in Shanghai, and Shanghai was great. And that was in about 2012 from memory.
2012,
My second encounter has been in the last 2 years. My daughter lived in Shanghai for the last 2 years. She left in April. She's back in Australia now. But she was working for a large company over there, an American-owned company. It's got a guy with ears on it that and they've got a facility in Shanghai called Disney Resort, and she was there working. I'm not allowed to say how she was working there, but she used to sing a lot of songs, but the salient lesson here is what that allowed me to do. I went 5 times in 2 years. Spent 2 weeks there each time, or just short of 2 weeks each time, to visit the daughter and to have fun. On some of those trips, I managed to get to some factories and go and see SIG Energy and a couple of others. And I watched over 2 years, first of all, the remarkable part, my first journey back in that trip 2 years ago. Wow, look at all the electric cars. And then in 2 years, I've gone back 5 times. I've got, there's even more. Oh, there's even more.
Yeah.
Oh, there's even more. And Shanghai, just is a beautiful city. And I do remember the smog that was through China when I went through in 2012. I
was going to say, it must have been pretty bad then, or it could be bad, I'm sure. Yeah.
It could be bad. They'd started on their, back in 2012 was the execution of get my maths right, I think it might have been the 13th 5-year plan. We can't complain about China because China's always told us what they're going to do. They've written a 5-year plan.
Yes.
And then
they do it.
And here's our next one. This is what we're going to do next. And just an economist's disease get in the way. They'll never do that. Can't possibly meet their numbers. It's too big a target. How could they possibly change that much? And this is the extraordinary part of the juggernaut that is China and China manufacturing and China clean tech manufacturing, which is going to be so critical to the world, and how we all stop using fossil fuels.
This episode is brought to you by Hankook. The Hankook Ion tyre is built exclusively for electric vehicles, engineered to deliver what EV drivers need most: confident grip, quietness, energy efficiency, and long mileage. As the official tyre partner of Formula E, Hankook proves its EV technology is at the highest level of performance and brings that same innovation to every Ion tyre on the road. But I think what I think is noticeable now, a difference that's emerging is, say, even from the UK and Australia, is I think Australia has much less, well, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's sort of less, I don't even know what the word is, anxiety about adopting Chinese technology. I mean, the idea of Chinese products in Australia doesn't seem to be a problem, whereas there are much less than in the United States. But there is some people in England will still say, "I wouldn't have a Chinese car because they'll spy on me."
Yes, yeah,
They
and
say on their
100%
say
we've
on their
got those
phone
same.
that was made in China.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes. Just because it's got an Apple logo on it doesn't mean it wasn't made in China.
Yeah, made in China. But I mean, and obviously, United States at the moment completely sort of closed the door on that. But I mean, the number of, well, we just know from our live events that are on, in one coming up in September. There's so many Chinese companies have cars on display there,
Yeah.
way more than we have in Europe. I mean, it's a really big adoption of Chinese tech in Australia. Am I wrong?
Well, no, and you'd remember that, of course, we used to have car companies in Australia that built cars.
Yes.
They all left last decade. And it's probably been a good thing they did, because they weren't going to build electric cars. They kept on insisting on building 8 cylinders and insisting that that's all we needed to do to make sure that we had a car industry. And they used to export the 8-cylinder Pontiac out of an Australian factory back to the US. Didn't last long because they closed the factory because they weren't selling enough. And I think part of that is, though, your first comment was that people aren't necessarily trusting of Chinese goods. I don't know that we've got as much of a dilemma here in Australia. First of all, we're a pretty cosmopolitan country, and we're pretty good at adopting friends, and the friends can be whoever they need to be. But we work hard on that. There's been, some one nation stuff going on, which I'm sure you've been observing, and we don't need to put any fuel to that fire. Apart from saying that I think generally Australians are pretty good. And there's always a percentage wherever you are on the planet.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
I think the percentage in Australia, while some people are saying it's growing, I think it's just about the same, and it's just people expressing their opinions more because we've got these devices that let us talk to one another across the planet.
Yeah. No, very true. But that is, I mean, it is, however you look at it. I mean, just one of the statistics that, China exported 1 million cars in 1 month in June of this year is like, wait a minute, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of cars to make, full stop, let alone export, but to actually, the logistics of exporting 1 million cars melts my brain. I mean, I've been on a ship that I think had 2,000 cars on it, and that was complicated and big. That's nothing.
Yeah. Well, BYD ships, their biggest ones, can carry 9,500 cars at a time. Their earlier ones were carrying 6. Most of the roll-on, roll-off vessels now are sort of a minimum of 5, although there are specialist ones, because at the end of the day, you have to send smaller loads to different places. If you're sending a shipload to Australia, it's better to take a big ship. Whereas if you're sending a shipload through Europe, then you've got multiple ports you want to get to, and to reduce your logistics of delivery through better port access. Look, but I'm looking at the whole of China in the sense of its development of technology, and we've seen them move from making our McDonald's toys in 1990 to something more sophisticated in the start of the noughties, and actually starting to accelerate by 2008 when Beijing Olympics were on. That was really coincided with some of the bigger, most important 5-year plans that China had, which were rolling out the clean tech and saying this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're mapping our future. But to get to that point, we're going to do multiple things. First, we'll build cars with small batteries, and then we'll build cars with bigger batteries. And they kind of skipped a step. They did do buses really heavily for a while, but that's because they wanted that to work on pollution in cities and winding that back. You step forward now, though, and they're now reached the point where the folks I work with, Professor Peter Newman and a few others, we're really convinced that 2026 is the pivotal year for trucking. And we've seen that in port exports. We've had the reports of almost 1,000 trucks getting stuck onto a ro-ro and heading to America as a single sail to a group. China is ramping up their truck production, and logically, commercially, you should do the big stuff after you've done the small stuff. You get the small stuff right, and then the big stuff is 2 or 3 of the small stuff joined together, 2 or 3 battery sets. So instead of a 100 kilowatt battery in my Zika, we're going for a 400 kilowatt battery in the next 20-ton truck we're going to sell. And those natural evolutions are there. And it's applying actually across all the technologies that we're looking at. So, we've mentioned robotics and the Android robots. The scale of production that's coming there is quite extraordinary in terms of the intelligence of the thing and its ability to move better than I can. I'm going to buy one of those robot suits one day. And the critical thing, but the thing that we forget there is, and they're all battery operated. So the reducing cost of batteries is not just enhancing cars, it's not just enhancing mobile devices, it's actually contributing to now trucks, but also all of the things we haven't imagined yet. I posted an internet meme up a few years back, which was a baby riding on the back of a RoboVac. And my comment was, batteries will be included in everything, and sometimes their uses will surprise us. And there's this little baby going, riding on the RoboVac. Yay. But we'll make use of those batteries in a way we never imagined. We didn't imagine 20 years ago we're going to have robot vacuums that went around and cleaned the house. But and now we've got them for the lawn. The lawn mowers are coming out as well, and they're just great big RoboVacs, but with blades and slashing knives, more like a Monty Python abattoir than a necessarily a toy. But those sorts of changes are coming to us, and I think that extraordinary rate of growth is just hard to conceive. We've done a lot of writing about it in the last few months. So we've put out about probably close to 90 popular articles between all the group, those of us that are working together. Peter Newman and I have done about 65, so about 2/3 of those.
I've been reading them. It's amazing how much you've produced. Yeah, I'm very
and we're doing it because we've reached a conclusion that if we write a scientific paper about it, it's going to take us at least 6 months to get it published. And by then, we'll have moved on to the next thing. So Peter and I have actually strategically agreed that what we're going to do is go to try and get evidence-rich papers published as much as we can in the popular literature, places like Renew Economy with Giles Parkinson and his Driven magazine, across to the Fifth Estate with Tina, trying to get into places like The Conversation, who on our metrics are a little bit slow. It takes them a couple of weeks. Oh no, we want to do it in a day or two, and we want to capture the headline, and we want to actually comment on the headline, but particularly comment on the headline to say how this clean tech stuff fixes it. The problem you just talked about is already repaired if only we adopt clean tech.
Yes. I mean, because it's very hard, when I do public talks about this, which I've done a few recently, what I want to say is, look, the biggest technology is batteries. And then I'm going, oh, is it really though? Is it not wind and solar? And then you go, well, actually, I think it is, it will be seen historically as the era of the battery, when the battery became a viable, economically viable, technologically viable, critical part of our energy infrastructure. I mean, is that a fair assessment of it?
Look, I agree entirely. I think Steven Spielberg needs to remake his movie and call it Batteries Included.
Yes.
Everything we do will have batteries. I've got a water bottle here not because I normally drink from a water bottle, but somebody gave it to me yesterday when I went to a meeting, and I'm still drinking it, and I'm going to finish it today, and so I won't have wasted it. But but I can imagine a time when batteries are so cheap that there'll be a little unit in the bottom of a container like that will keep your cup cold or even warm.
Wow.
Now, will that be thrown away? Hopefully not. Hopefully it'll be simply recyclable as it all should be. And as we improve our recycling ecosystem, and we talked about this last time when we mentioned when we were talking in Brisbane a couple of years ago, we talked about Jim Chalmers and his need to support a battery recycling ecosystem in Australia. Sadly, 2 years on, we haven't got it yet. But I'm going to keep talking about it until we do. He won't be able to shut me up. Well, maybe he can. I don't know what resources he has. But I guess the critical part here is your conclusion about batteries being fundamental. without renewables, we couldn't have had batteries become important. Yes. But because of renewables, batteries have become important and are indeed the biggest gain. You can look at the data exports from China, and Ember have been putting out some charts on this, and I included some in my post back to you. And what that shows is that the value of solar exported by China peaked in about 2024, I think the year was. The graph went up, and now the graph's going down, despite the fact that the export volume is through the roof. Solar's just cheaper. And so even though you're selling lots more solar panels, it's actually not more money's worth than you did 2 or 3 years ago, which was the peak of solar in terms of export value. But the thing that's crept up with that has been the export of batteries continuing to climb, and then just slightly lagging behind, but in the last couple of months has the value of electric vehicles exported from China is now higher than the value of all batteries. Now, EVs are obviously counting their own batteries internally, but there's batteries you export, and then there's products with batteries in them like EVs, which get counted separately. So raw battery exports, there you go. But now EVs are outselling in terms of value of product. EVs are now outselling batteries as a value return to China. It's not surprising. You make things more complex and charge people more money for them. Of course, you make more money out of it. And that's where we're seeing China really excel at this point. China is now doing not just wind and solar and batteries, but they're doing storage. They're doing heat storage. They're doing induction pumps. They're doing robots. They're doing all of these other things. And on the chart of vehicles, the thing that China has now the biggest share of out of everything, 80% share of solar, 80% share of EVs, but 90% share of heavy-duty electric vehicles. So most of the world's electric vehicles are most certainly going to come from China. And unless Europe picks up the game in terms of motivating forward, and it's kind of there. I sent you another little lovely chart that showed that China and Thailand are doing extraordinarily well in the electrification race. And Europe is just sort of hanging in the middle. And down the bottom is the US, and down below US is Japan. Japan are doing really badly. And Michael Liebrich made a wonderful comment in a talk that he gave, and he talked about America, the petrostate. And he talked about that because everybody had started talking about the electrostate. So then he referred to China as the electrostate, and then he referred to Europe, and he said, Europe, the state of confusion.
That's so true.
Because they're trying to do climate, but they're not trying to be strong enough about it.
And I mean, there's kind of exceptions, because one of the things that, which I don't really remember happening to this degree other than with Tesla, is the Renault 5. So the Renault 5, we went to the launch. It's amazing. We loved it. Everyone raved about it. All the journalists raved about it. And often that happens, and then you don't see anything. I now go out on the road, I'll see 40 Renault 5s on the road between here and a local town. I mean, they've been incredibly popular. That's a European designed, European manufactured car, probably with Chinese batteries. But, so it's such a perfect example of confusion, because equally the cars I don't notice are all the Renaults with a combustion engine, of which there's far more, so.
And look, the work we've been doing. So Raphael Wellman, he's a German analyst, has joined us. He often puts out magic graphs that I think are a really good way of portraying how the changes are coming. And Raphael's data was showing us that actually France is doing better than Germany in terms of its adoption of electric vehicles and its production of electric vehicles. Now, in one sense, Germany's not winning, so therefore France isn't winning either, but they're just beating Germany. But in the other sense, it's better than being on the bottom.
Yeah. And I mean, it's noticeable in terms of infrastructure. I mean, I drove through France very recently, and you'll stop at a supermarket. I mean, I've talked about this, endlessly, but you stop at a supermarket and there isn't, like in the UK, there might be 4 rapid charges in one corner of a big supermarket car park. We went to one, there was 47 Tesla superchargers and over 350 a kilowatt rapid chargers from another company. So there was miles of chargers, and also the whole car park covered in solar panels, and that was in France. Well,
that's the brilliant thing
you're not
France
seeing that
has
in
done.
Germany yet. Yeah, they have done some.
Nor are we seeing it in Australia.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, the changes I've seen in Australia in the last 10 years are remarkable. I mean, there has been. I mean, it's still my favourite Australian electric car charging point anecdote is I went, and I can't remember where it was. It wasn't that far from, where's the dog sitting on the tucker box? Where it's in that area.
Yeah, Bendigo.
Bendigo. It's that area.
Bendigo?
There was what is it called? God, no, don't worry.
It's a B word.
Anyway, it's a B word. Gundagai.
Of course it is. If it wasn't a B word at all, just ignore my last sentence. We can edit that bit out, can't we? Okay.
But it was somewhere in that. It wasn't at Gundagai, but it's near there. There was just a petrol station, and round the back there were four or five newly installed chargers. I think the RACQ, whoever it was, one of those companies. But one of them and they were operational, but one of them had big, deep ridges in the concrete where someone had reversed to plug in when the concrete was still wet. Which shows that there was but it was I used it because it was so easy. Once your tires just dropped into it was like being on a train. It just went to the right point. You didn't have to steer.
Design innovation, Australia.
Yes, it was. Yes. Yeah. But then,
before we move on from that, the other thing that's been significantly announced a couple of days ago by Chris Bowen, the Energy Minister here, is that he's expanding assistance for panels beyond rooftop systems of homes to rooftop systems of industries. And so we're now going up to 1 megawatt assistance for rooftop solar, which is extraordinary, but it just means that the large expanses of industrial parks that are out there can finally cover their rooftops.
That is so frustrating. I mean, it's brilliant to hear that, and so frustrating to hear that here in this country where that isn't the case, and it should be. And everybody's raving about why aren't all the big warehouses covered in solar panels? I mean, some of them are, but most of them aren't, and it is such an obvious thing. Car parks and buildings is where we should definitely be.
Yeah, look, I've got an interesting business anecdote there, and it comes from a few years back, but I think it's still relevant, is that I spoke to a number of business guys who are not putting solar on the roof. I said, look, you got this magic roof, you got all that space. He said, but we only work 5 days a week. And so on the weekend, we don't get paid for any electricity we export. So therefore, we don't want to give our electricity for free to the power utility. So the only way we can do that is not to have solar, because we don't want to give the government something for free in a very Australian accent.
Yes.
I think while there was no business case for it, even if they had have given it away for free, they still would have been paying a lot less for their electricity than they would have.
Yes.
This will change that, though. This will bring in the cusp of change that we needed for here.
Yeah. And because that is one thing I would love to talk to you about, because I think and this again may be my misinterpretation, but it feels like the adaptation of the grid in Australia is in advance of anywhere else that I know. I mean, certainly in advance of us here in the UK, definitely than the USA. It feels like you've had enough rooftop solar long enough for it to have had an impact on the energy market in general, for people to go, maybe we should change this a bit. I mean, because, one of the things that we're absolutely screwed by in this country is our electricity price is governed by the price of gas, which, as you can imagine, in the last few years has meant that our electricity prices have gone up enormously. And yet we are still, like today, we will be 70, 80% renewably powered because it's a sunny, windy day.
Yeah, there's three critical tipping points involved. And it's just maths. Once you get above 50% renewable penetration, your grid changes. But until you get there, something else controls it. While it's below 50%, and in our context and in your context, gas controls the market. But as soon as you push it over 50%, then 50% of the time it's renewables that are setting the price. And so that works pretty well. But actually, the sun just like the skeptics say, the sun doesn't shine every day as much as it could. And so therefore you've got to be able to do something with that. And the wind doesn't blow. Okay. But we add batteries into this. And the critical number for Australia for the batteries has been a 2% penetration of batteries per day in the grid has been sufficient to shave the top off the gas price. Right. So you've got renewables pushing the stuff down.
Yeah.
But when it gets a bit variable and gas has to cut in, prices spike back up again, except that batteries are cutting off the top of the gas.
Right.
Because they're competing in that peaking market. And when they do that, combined with the renewables, that's what's been the really pivotal swing in the whole of price, the wholesale price for Australia has started to fall for pretty much the last 12 months or so, about 14 months. It started to come down. It's coming down a lot faster now. It's being reflected in the wholesale price. The wholesale price moves on to set the retail price. The retail price is regulated in our case, and until the Australian Energy Market Regulator goes, it's coming down, okay, I can reset the retail price now. And they've just announced they intend to do that soon.
Right.
Sometime soon.
Yes. Very exciting. But I mean, presumably the other thing is that I'm assuming that in Australia, the generating capacity of gas and coal is not increasing, whereas the storage capacity from batteries is increasing and will continue to increase. Would that be a fair?
Yeah. So the amount of storage we've got this year so far to the month of July, I think the date. It's now August. Yes. Okay, that works. To the month of July is now double the amount of storage we had last year.
Right. Wow. Okay.
So
big change.
That's working pretty well. And the growth rate of storage is extraordinary because not only is it happening, that's only measuring utility storage. We're now also getting this domestic storage going on, and domestic storage now exceeds utility storage in Australia, which is actually the same that happens in Germany. Germany, the largest share of the market is actually domestic storage. And they've got around just north of 20 gigs in total, about 18. I don't quite remember the numbers, but about 18 out of their 20 is domestic storage.
Wow.
That's not particularly well measured in the same way that we had trouble measuring how our impact of our solar rooftops were going because it's behind everybody's meter. We now do that mostly through an estimate, but it's important to be able to measure things. You know, the engineers will tell you if you can't manage what you can't measure, famous old phrase, and they're right. So one of the things we're lacking is really good data that's extensive and deep. We're pushing the point now for data management. Ironically, at the same time, we're controversially talking about data centers and, oh my God, they're going to destroy the planet. I've got a view of that. If they're carefully planned and they're powered by renewables, we'll be fine. But it's just a matter of ensuring that because a smart energy future is going to need data, and that data has to be managed and stored and processed somewhere. And we can all do it on our laptops, but we tried that with the SETI program. We never found any aliens. You know what SETI was? We did that. But that was, we're gone past that point now. We've gone back to the point where we actually have centrally powered computers that are doing a grunt load of work. We need that to happen because there's so much data we need to manage effectively and by the second so that we can manage our energy grids and so that we can manage our plug-ins of our electric cars and all of the data that flows from that.
Yes. And I mean, I think the next step, I mean, it's just starting here, is the fact that you can use your car as a battery for your house or for the grid. And I mean, that's, it's been talked about for so long, it's actually annoying and boring. But, it is such an obvious next step. If there is now over 2 million electric cars in the UK, if they were all plugged in and the national grid could take 1 kilowatt hour out of each of them. I mean, it's an absurd notion, but if they could, that's a nuclear power plant. That's a new nuclear power plant for an hour.
Victoria did a inquiry into electrification of fleet, and that we answered that call. We wrote a submission to them. We gave them evidence. It was a fun inquiry. and it was great to participate because they actually used a lot of our stuff. It was really cool.
Right. Oh, good. Yeah.
But the relevance there was they on the spot, they asked me, well, how much battery storage can all these EVs give us? And I did a quick back of the envelope, and it's not going to come back to me now because I don't remember what their starting number was, but I multiplied it by an 80 kilowatt battery system, and I say, well, that would be about 4 gigs of power, I think was the number I came up with. And they go, look at that. And we're not even using it because we don't have vehicle to grid yet, and we've got to be able to do that. So it really is. I don't think vehicle to grid will be day-to-day something you do, but during the periods where there's a crisis and there's an energy shortage, there will be rewards for people that are prepared to plug their cars in vehicle to grid. And those that have to travel a long way tomorrow aren't going to do it. But only 10% of it's ever travel a long way. So the other 90% of it can just plug in.
Yeah. I mean, there was actually a Dutch engineer that I spoke to a few years ago, sort of wanted to remove the myth that the grid would empty the battery of a car. He said we need 1 kilowatt hour from a million vehicles, and we can run the country. Is that it isn't? You don't drain it. You take a bit from each one. You've got to use this distributed very widely. I mean, that was quite
and for the most part, the car makers that are setting their cars up to do V2G are restricting it to only 20% of the vehicle. So they can't take more than that. That's all that the car software will allow.
Yeah. No, I mean that is well. I mean, I think what the other driving force I think we should mention is the I always call him the Orange Emperor. I shouldn't, but the fact that a war was started with one of the world's major oil suppliers, and where with a gap in the sea that all the ships that can carry oil all around the world have to go through, really messed things up. And there are two big things that messed everything up of the old system was Russia invading Ukraine and the war in Iran. And it's just like, that the impact that's had, I feel, psychologically on the British population is, oh, hang on, this stuff that we buy that comes in isn't secure. Forget the climate impact, forget tree hugging, forget everything. It's not a secure supply of fuel. Whereas the wind and the sun, it's turned that argument on its head. There's one thing we can rely on, and that's wind and sun. We can't rely on gas and oil.
It's lovely. It's almost like they created a place of biblical proportions, and they said, none shall pass unless you go through the Strait of Hormuz. That's all you've got left. And the critical thing about this particular crisis is that with the last 3 oil crises, starting in 75, we didn't have a technology to replace it.
No.
Now we do. A lot's been said about how quickly China's ramped up, but really China's ramping up really quickly, yes, but that's only after about 10 or 15 years of planning. And 10 or 15 years of planning that was stated in the 5-year plans. We're going to build cars. Okay, now we're going to build electric cars, and we're ready to do that. And, COVID came along. There was a bit of a speed bump as China was about to release in 2019. All car companies went like that. So did China, but China's only did a little bit. But then China just launched from 2021. It's gone from being the fifth biggest fifth or sixth biggest car exporter to now number 1. It's now beating Japan. And that extraordinary growth, people have gone, they snuck that one in. Oh, no, they didn't. They told us about 15 years ago that this is what they're going to do.
Yes.
So if only the spies had read the fifth five-year plan.
Because that one of the statistics I read from you is that the global, because I've often wondered what that impact is, and is it having an impact on the oil industry, the transition to electric vehicles? Global EV fleet has displaced 1.8 million barrels a day globally. Is that noticed? Have the oil industry noticed?
The answer is yes, it is, because 1.8 million barrels is a bit over. It's a bit over 1.5%, because rough rule of thumb, about 100 million barrels. You cheat a lot, and you just say, there's 2. So that's about 2% of the oil industry. When you move 2% of the oil industry, you affect pricing. China's actually just said, we don't need 2% of the oil anymore. There's a lot been said about China and the Hormuz Strait and how China last year, when oil was really cheap last year, in relative terms compared to the last 3 or 4 years, China filled up all of its oil reserves. And one of the things that they've been doing strategically is depleting their oil reserves this year. So China's got massive oil reserves. I can't give you a number in the top of my head but that's back there somewhere. But they literally filled up all their tanks. Now, Australia has only got up to 45% of its tanks full. I don't know what Europe is doing, what UK is doing in that strategic oil reserve capacity, but their tanks won't be full. They'll only be about half full. No. The US had filled up their tanks, and I don't know whether you've heard this story or not, but Trump allowed ExxonMobil to sell the US fuel reserves this year to ensure that the US was not short of oil. And he made the deal with them, said that for every dollar's worth you take out, you've got to put $1.20 back in. Or no, I think it was a volume, not a value. So about every dollar you take, you got to give us back $1.20. And they went, oh yeah, that's fine, we can do that. So we'll keep selling all this oil while it's still dear, and then when the time comes to refill your tanks, we'll buy the oil cheaper, but replace it at 1.2, and everybody will make money. And Donald Trump says, I love a good deal. And so that's what they've done. They're reaching the point now, though, where there's pressure on their oil reserves that they've really got to start refilling. Same time that their missile reserves seem to be surprisingly low. I don't know what they've been doing with all those missiles, but apparently they've gone too. And so we've got this situation where normally after an oil crisis, there's about 2 years. If you look at the data, there's about 2 years where it hangs on and then it starts to slide again. So we'd got to the end of our 2 years of Russia impacting through the Ukraine and the oil crisis there. We got through about 2 years, and oil had been starting to slide a little. But this just boosted it back up, but actually not as far as we expected. And part of the reason for that is because Trump said to ExxonMobil, you can sell the oil. And so that took the pressure off the US market, and that took the pressure off of imports. But in the meanwhile, China had said, well, we don't need that 2% anymore, so bye. And so there was a surprise that China didn't need as much oil from Hormuz as before.
As expected.
All of this global oil politics is being disassembled by China. And, again, going back to Liebrich's comment that China's the electrostate, I don't think he created that particular observation, but he made use of it in such a clever way. And it's just true. And they're going gangbusters, which isn't that a term for an oil well, gangbusters? I don't know.
Yes, could be.
But China are just doing extraordinary things because they can. They're a manufacturing behemoth, and they can produce goods in record time of record quality. And this is the other part that's coming, is that people, going back to your earlier comment about how we rate Chinese goods, there was a view 10 years ago, and perhaps deservedly, that Chinese goods weren't as good. But the nicest car I've ever driven in my life, and I've been fortunate. I've owned a couple of Beamers. I've had a Mercedes. I've had a Ford as well. But the quality of the Zeekr that I have is just remarkable. It's a beautiful car to drive. It's far better than the Beamer I used to own, and it's just a good car. It's a quality car. We didn't expect that 10 or 15 years ago, but now we just do. And the critical part of that is the manufacturing techniques coming from China, robotisation. Many of their factories are robotic, and that brings quality. You remove the human out of the equation. Now, China has a skill shortage, just as the rest of us do, but they're solving it with robotics, whereas we're hesitant because we're worried that if we solve our job problems in the UK or Australia with robotics, we're going to put people out of work. But the workforce has never been better. Australia's workforce unemployment rate is currently 4.4%, according to the Reserve Bank just today. We talked about the Reserve Bank last time we met in Brisbane too. We couldn't solve their problems. And the phrase back then was, what does the Reserve Bank do with free? we were talking about the reducing costs of energy, and we were talking about, and back then 2 years ago, we were describing what was about to happen to the gas system and the battery system and the way it played in there. And what we described actually happened. And that's what we've experienced now in this last 12 to 14 months when prices have declined. So I don't know what took me down that path, but it was a lot of fun going there.
It's a lot of fun. But I mean, we have to wind up fairly soon. But one of the bits of information that struck me, and I just am so unaware of it, is the prediction that Australian imports of cars from Thailand will overtake imports from cars from China. And I'm thinking, I didn't know a lot of cars are even
China,
made in
Japan. They'll overtake Japan.
Oh, sorry, they'll overtake Japan. I beg your pardon.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And they won't catch China in a heartbeat because they're at.
No, I was going to say.
But the logic there is that China is building a lot of vehicles. What we've found is that there's a great indicator. If you build a lot of electric cars at home, you tend to sell a lot of electric cars overseas too because your factories make them. And that's China. It's also Thailand. Right. If you don't build a lot of electric cars at home, that's the USA or Japan. Yeah. You tend not to have electric cars to sell to everybody, so you don't export very many. It's really just a simple metric, but it really does explain the difference between China and now Thailand, particularly because Thailand is seen by China as a industrial ally. And there's a lot of Chinese companies like BYD and Geely are going into Thailand to build their factories there, because Thailand has made some really good tax concessions for companies that come and build a factory in Thailand and export stuff. And China's gone, well, we're building a lot of cars and we need to build more factories. Why don't we build some in Thailand and make use of that Southern Asian market in a focused way? If you stick a car on a ship for a ro-ro, if you can take it a long journey or a short journey, it's better that you don't have to double handle it. And so, so Southeast Asia is going to buy a lot of Thai cars. And who in Southeast Asia are buying a lot of Thailand cars? Singapore and Indonesia. Indonesia is the second fastest take-up of electric cars in the world. It's quite extraordinary. Wow. And it's only been beaten by... and this is a smaller metric, but it's only being beaten by, I want to say Nepal, but it's not Nepal. It's the wonderful country nearby, with everybody goes to retreat. I can't think. I'm
glad you do this too, because it's exactly what I do. I know you can see images of that country, and that they're very.
They're banging gongs and they're singing, and they do that in Nepal anyway. What's the world's happiness index country?
Oh, but it's not the one up in the Himalayas.
That one.
Yes, because yes, the
they're just
happiest
doing
country in the world.
gangbusters on electric cars. They've just said we import all our oil. Yeah. It's got to come up a hill. We've got sunshine. We've got wind. We've got all this renewables. We've got hydro. We can make it home. And
we're both going to remember that.
Can you put in a slight overwritten part where we actually name the country?
I'll do it as a lower third because we'll both remember the name of this country. It's going to come to me.
Hang on, you ready?
But okay, the sort of that. Your statistics about Singapore, because I used to go to Singapore regularly on my way to Australia with my kids when they were little, and we'd stay there, and it was amazing, and I loved being there. Particularly in the UK winter, you get off a plane in Singapore and go, oh, thank goodness, especially with small children. It was wonderful. But I hadn't really kept up with that the percentage of new car sales it makes Norway look embarrassing. I mean, it's basically they just buy electric cars now. They don't bother with anything else. Which makes so much sense.
Norway can deserve to hold itself with pride with the work that it's done over a decade. But Singapore is going to do it in about 3 years.
Yeah, that's extraordinary.
Done. Look, there are elections in Singapore. It's a democratic state, but it's also one that's very comfortable with central control. Lee Kuan Yew was a marvellous statesman that showed people that they can trust the government, and because they trust the government, when we make a decision, you guys just have to do it, and everybody's got to smile and they generally do, and they don't chew gum.
No.
But that's okay because it's working.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Indonesia's a bit different. Indonesia is a petrostate in the sense that it exports a lot of oil, but it also uses a lot of oil at home. And Indonesia has always subsidised its oil to its citizens.
Right.
So it costs them, I think, around it's in billions, 20s of billions or 30s of billions of dollars. It costs them internally to subsidise oil. If they put their population onto electric cars, suddenly all of their oil is just export.
Yeah.
So they not only save the subsidy, but they gain the profit of the export. Now they're also looking to build a car industry, and China's come into Indonesia going, yeah, we see your nickel, we see all of your copper reserves. They're going to be important in electric cars, and when we build factories, we'll be able to use that as a supply chain input. Indonesia's gone, tickety-boo, let's do that, and they are.
Yeah.
And so they're just going extraordinarily fast. Whereas Singapore is threatening to do it in 3 or 4 years, Indonesia's threatening to do it in 2 or 3. They're going that quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be fair, a lot of them are 2 and 3 wheelers.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
Well, that was the most noticeable thing I saw in China was the scooters.
Yes.
The scooters and mopeds and rickshaws. It was just extraordinary. The numbers of those were, any argument you've got about the continuation of burning fossil fuels in a 2-stroke engine, just forget it. I don't think I saw one. They're probably not allowed, but I didn't see one combustion engined scooter thing.
I didn't
hear that sound.
You hear about one in, I reckon it'd be one in a couple of thousand. They were still there,
maybe.
One of them, one guy was wearing a leather jacket, so of course he was making noise. But aside from that, there were a couple there, but clearly I don't know. I don't know enough about what the replacement program was to incentivise that. But I think ultimately they just weren't building the other ones. So if you wanted to buy a scooter, it was going to be electric, baby.
Got an electric one. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that is extraordinary. That was one of my favourite moments was I went out for a walk early one morning. There was a lot of people going to work right in the middle of Shanghai. And I could hear birds singing in the trees. And there's thousands of scooters going past me, not 1 or 2, thousands, just a constant flow. But I went, I can smell cigarettes. Then I realised that half the people on the scooters had a cigarette as they were riding along in their clean energy scooters. It was still smoking. Somehow it tickled me.
Still combustion of a form.
It's still a bit of combustion going on. Ray, I just want to say it is such a joy to talk to you, your enthusiasm, your knowledge and everything. And also I think we're both blessed being, I'll be cruel to both of us, being a couple of old duffers who are witnessing this incredible transition in the sort of latter part of our lives. Kind of keeps my brain fairly healthy. It's like a brain gym, trying to understand batteries and solar and wind and grid infrastructure and the politics that surround it is it's a healthy thing to be involved with. I think we're both blessed.
I've been really fortunate. I first got involved with talking about energy efficiency and renewable energy in 2003. Right. And then I went on to work with West Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where I became their energy advisor. And then I went on to be the head of the Sustainable Energy Association of Australia, which is about when we first met.
Yes.
And so in that time, I've had a grand opportunity to understand it fundamentally in a way that I was youngish then, but not, I'm 20 years older now. And so one of the things that I'm doing with Peter Newman is this overarching look at all things, whether it's about this planning of a precinct and where you put a bus depot so that there's charging stations for trucks as well, or whether you plan that for a community battery to be attached to it. Now, we've just built 5 bus depots here in Perth, and none of them are connected to the community. They're all end at the fence, and only 2 of them have any solar on them and not enough to make a difference to their precinct. What are they thinking? And it's government owned. So if we're going to see leadership from government, we need to see practitioner execution by government as well. They need to be thinking better about integrated planning. We all know stories, and yes, Minister trained us all about politics. But we all know stories about the absence of integrated planning and the importance of silos to keep the others away, because this is our idea. This has got to be the collaborative age. We have to actually have better collaboration, and that actually extends to China. We've got to collaborate better with China, because they can deliver the product that will save our asses.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed that. We both had a bit of a mental block. It was very amusing. We worked out immediately after the recording the name of the country, Bhutan, that we were talking about, which isn't the right country anyway, as you could see from the graphics there. But other than that, what an amazing man. What an absolute joy to talk to Ray. We'll definitely get him back on the podcast soon. That's all. Please do tell your friends and relatives about Everything Electric and what we're doing on YouTube and our live events. And please subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, if you have been, thank you for watching.